I'm with the Nature Conservancy and I'm based out of our office on the coast. And I have the great opportunity to work throughout our coastal area. And today I want to zoom in and to talk about conservation, some of the ways from a conservation standpoint, some of the ways that we work in partnership with many and work towards resiliency. And some of the things that I'll touch on along the way include examples from rivers to reefs and talking about connections and different importance from the significance from the global and the national and local levels, and also of how on the Georgia coast, how our work goes from different scales and from different geographies and different land and water types, and how one of the things that we have that I feel is so unique is this real mosaic, this mosaic of habitats and mosaic of people, and how by working together that we can strive and reach for and get closer towards having a resilient Georgia coast. Next. All along the Georgia coast, from South Carolina to Florida, 100 miles of Georgia coast with multiple habitat types and our 14 barrier island complexes. And I just love the image on the right, a color infrared that really lets us see, thinking about the red that's reflecting evergreen. So those evergreen habitat types from the live oaks on the coast all the way to the pines up beyond the Okefenokee on the west and up that middle Altamaha River. So just to take that, to think about it from that perspective, that aerial, that large landscape and seascape perspective. Next. And also, we have to look in and up the state, into the state, in order to protect our coastal areas. So considering those watersheds, the watersheds that, the activities, the land and water practices that come down through those watersheds do have an impact on our coastal areas. And that gray area, if you go out all the way towards the coast and the mouth of those rivers, the gray area, those are the watersheds for our tidal creeks. So those are within the tidal areas of extents, and those areas are very important too for the health of our coastal waters, our health of our salt marshes and our oysters. So taking that perspective and thinking about breaking it down, and that's one of the things that I feel like over the years with the Nature Conservancy and my work that I've really come to appreciate even more is this changing scales and perspectives throughout. So looking at it from a large landscape and seascapes perspective, and then going down and zooming in and learning about it and communicating and planning at even an intermediate scale, and then at that very local scale. And I just think by working at those multiple scales and sharing, and also working with people throughout that we could come up with some of the wisest and best solutions for our situations. Next. And this is not going to go through all this, but I want to sharing with you some of the things. This is from our Nature Conservancy, from part of our strategic plan. And so I just wanted to point out that this has been informed. We've worked over the years with multiple stakeholders and groups throughout the coastal and up in the watersheds to look at and develop these long-term visions, and thinking about a resilient network of coastal and marine ecosystems, of how we can sustain it, and how that network can support those species and habitats, oyster reefs, salt marshes, sounds and estuaries, and many more different examples that are called out here. And all of this in the face of climate and population changes, and how these habitats, we want to take care of them so that they'll continue to provide these ecosystem services that are essential for both nature and for people. And thinking about, we have the opportunity, and when we think about all the experts in our coastal area and all the experiences and the partnerships, for us to be able to work to protect this rich diversity and health, thinking of functions and connectivity, so that we can learn these lessons, transfer those practices, and cultivate stewards that we can then work together to safeguard our coastal area and the associated habitats and the people. Okay, next. Salt marsh. Georgia, critical for our important salt marsh, and there are initiatives going on right now that many people are engaged in working together and developing a South Atlantic salt marsh, an action plan, initiative and action plan. And so each of these, we can look through the lenses, as I said, getting really small and detailed, and come up with plans and think about how those areas connect with other areas. And the salt marsh, very critical. Georgia has over a quarter of the Atlantic salt marsh habitat. And then these salt marshes, that extension west, looking at those areas of where our marshes extend. Next. And when we think about protecting salt marshes, which is on the left, an example of that on the left, we have to think about the future and with the changes that are projected of how we need to protect those corridors and those tidal areas, both saltwater tidal, freshwater tidal, and even the freshwater forest, which is on the right. That's an example in the Altamaha River of a fantastic example of a freshwater tidal bald cypress tupelo forest that is globally important. It seems common to us maybe on the coast because we do have some good examples of it, but it is a unique habitat type. And it's important for what it does right now from a filtering and protecting and helping with our water quality and our water quantity, and also in the future of what it will provide habitat for and space for. Next. Just briefly on this, I want to zoom into the oyster part of our coast and working to, and thinking of a vision for this, working toward the resilient network of healthy oyster reefs and these adjacent salt marshes and shorelines and estuaries with high productivity and species diversity. And how will we do that? This is something that we're really approaching from an integrated way. So not looking at it just as oysters for habitat or oysters for harvest for commercial fishers, but looking at the whole integrated big picture and working together in partnership to really have this inclusive and diverse stakeholder participation, and to have a process with a very equitable participation as people, as leaders throughout, and really from the planning all the way out through the communications, and to really strive for community-led and leadership throughout this, and bringing together living shorelines, oysters for harvest, oyster aquaculture, oysters for community, and oysters for our traditions, our overall heritage, and thinking of what we can do to really take care of oysters in this integrated approach. And so you see some photos there on it, just thinking about the top photo, thinking about that larger area of oysters. We really have to think about it at a landscape scale. And photo there of working, folks from working Sapelo Island, organization Shelter Shore and solo organization there working. And then the next photo is that's for the recycling oyster shell project. The next photo is oyster restoration, and then an example of a living shoreline on Little Cumberland Island. Next. This is 1800s, late 1800s along the Georgia coast. Next. Today, we have more of a veneer of oysters. So we've harvested oysters and we haven't returned shells to provide that substrate. And so our practice is now to try to help to restore these oysters. Next. And thinking about those ecosystem services that oysters do provide, everything from habitat to oyster fisheries and shoreline protection. Next. And so working together through integrated oyster management to achieve that and to come up with a common vision. Next. This Ernest McIntosh, Mr. McIntosh and his family work on are fishers based out of McIntosh County. And they are some of the first fishers towards oyster aquaculture in on the Georgia coast, which is a relatively new an innovative practice in Georgia. Georgia is different from a shoreline with high energy areas. And so a lot of it really provides, there's a great need to develop and test methods. So we're often the testing ground and we start with these pilot projects. And Mr. McIntosh, when the Nature Conservancy has a program called Supporting Oyster Aquaculture and Restoration, and working with a small grants program. And when Mr. McIntosh secured a grant through this, he wanted to use that to engage the youth, because he said people don't really know about oysters now. They don't know that that's even an option. And so he's working with students to be able to develop a work-study program through McIntosh Academy to help train people in the field of aquaculture. And not just aquaculture, that they want the ecology and oyster restoration and oyster recycling and all these elements to be a part of that program. Next. Benefits of living shorelines. And living shorelines are projects to use the alternatives as an alternative to bulkheads. Next. This is one of the priority living shorelines right now on the Georgia coast is at Harris Neck, the Harris Neck community. Rather than having a bulkhead there, working in partnership with many, working with the local community there in McIntosh, Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of Natural Resources, the Harris Neck community there, Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Community, to be a part of this project and to come up with a plan for this living shoreline, and also connecting it to Sapelo Island and other places. Next. And to bring in people as leaders. So this is just when you step back and think, why oysters? And think about all those connections across oysters and how it's something we can come together around to create these visions and shared visions and work plans. Next. Now just to zoom in and quickly look up from a watershed, looking at the watersheds along the coast. Next. And all the way out and recognizing Gray's Reef National Marine Sanctuary off the Georgia coast and how that is connected. As Jazz said, let's think about connections today. So thinking about the connections there. Next. Next, these are some examples, just give some visuals of looking upstream at different habitat types. Next. And how this next. Now I'm zooming in on a big collaborative project next of the Altamaha River, of how working with a shared vision and plan, how we can protect the Altamaha River. Next. Working together with this patchwork and this mosaic of conservation lands. And today we have a group of us working in partnership with 100 Miles, Department of Natural Resources, Little St. Simons Island, and others to think about how we can fill gaps, looking at smaller areas and for multiple purposes for a land protection. So looking at developing a land protection options for smaller areas. Next. And basing this on science, a strong foundation of science, and bringing people together around opportunities. And this is showing some of the important statewide action plan project areas from the Department of Natural Resources, with lots of collaboration to develop this plan, and it's in the process of being updated. So it's another example of working together towards this. Next. And I want to mention another scale, looking at zooming in now at a county scale, this level of work. Working with counties on a Camden County Resilience Implementation Work Plan with multiple partners there that you see. And my colleague Ashby Worley-Nix heads up this effort. And also I want to call out another different scale of project is working towards siting. As Megan pointed out, we have some of the siting issues that we have. So thinking of siting and how programs like this and solar siting tools, which we have, there'll be some links attached to this. Next. And to be able to have tools, next, to pull into this overall types of planning and working together. And I just want to close with this example. So this is, thinking about coastal resiliency for nature and people, and thinking through those different lenses, for the healthy oceans, and how I really think that by kind of going back and forth, zooming in on what your priority is, and then connecting it with all of these other different, maybe different priorities, and finding those overlaps and those opportunities for common and shared visions. I'll stop with that and look forward to more conversations about it. Thank you.